Here's a question that should bother more people than it does. Think about someone you know, or maybe think about yourself, who got a decent salary increase at some point. Maybe 10%, maybe more. It felt like a turning point. Finally, some breathing room. And yet, a year later, they're not saving any more than they were before. The month still runs out more or less when it used to. What happened to the money? The short answer is, it got absorbed by a slightly nicer flat, a car payment that made sense at the new salary, a few subscriptions that seemed reasonable, eating out a bit more because, well, you earned it. Each individual decision was defensible. Together, they consumed the raise entirely. That's lifestyle creep. And what makes it dangerous isn't that it feels bad, it's that it feels completely fine, normal, even expected. It's just what happens when life improves. Except the financial consequence is exactly the same as if the raise never happened. Today, we're going to look at three things. Why income growth so reliably fails to produce wealth growth. Why the things we accumulate over a lifetime can quietly become one of our biggest financial liabilities. And what the actual numbers look like when you compare two very different approaches to the cost of living. This isn't about telling you how to live. It's about making sure that whatever life you're running it with your eyes open. Quick reminder before we get into it. Everything I share here is based on my own research and experience, purely for educational purposes. Everyone's situation is different, so do your own research, and if you need specific advice, talk to a financial advisor. Deloitte runs a global survey every year. In 2025, they polled more than 23,000 people across 44 countries, Gen Z and millennials specifically. One of the findings, more than half of both groups said they live paycheck to paycheck. For the Netherlands specifically, the figure was 47% of Gen Z and 46% of millennials. That's not a developing economy. That's one of the wealthiest countries in Europe. Now, these are not people who earn nothing. Many of them have jobs. Some have good jobs. And still, the month runs out before the money does. The European Central Bank documented what happened to real wages in the euro area between mid-2021 and 2023, the period when inflation surged. On average, real wages across the eurozone fell by about 5%. In practice, that means if you earned 3,000 euros a month, you lost roughly 150 euros a month in purchasing power. 150 euros a month you never saw disappear, but it was gone. That's the structural backdrop. Real purchasing power contracted, while the cost of maintaining a normal European lifestyle stayed flat or increased. So many households adapted, without really noticing, by spending a slightly higher proportion of what they earned. And then, if a salary increase arrived, the pattern repeated. Spending adjusted upward to meet the new income. The savings rate stayed roughly the same. This is the mechanism of lifestyle creep. It's not a single decision. It's a slow recalibration of what feels normal, and it's almost invisible from the inside, because every step along the way feels like a rational response to circumstances. The upgrade to the bigger flat justified, because you're earning more. The newer car reasonable, because the monthly payment fits the new salary. The premium gym membership, fair enough, you work hard. None of these things is irresponsible in isolation. The problem is that, taken together, they have a very specific mathematical consequence. Let me give you a concrete example. Suppose someone's income increases and they redirect 200 euros a month into lifestyle upgrades, collectively. A slightly higher rent, a car payment, a few extras. 200 euros a month that in the previous version of their life would have been available to invest. 200 euros a month invested in a broad index ETF at a 7% average annual return over 30 years using the standard compound interest formula produces roughly 240,000 euros. The 200 euros in monthly contributions becomes 72,000 euros in total contributions. The rest, around 170,000 euros, is compounding. That's the cost of the upgrade. Not the purchase price of any single thing, but the lifetime opportunity cost. That's the invisible tax of lifestyle creep. It doesn't show up on any invoice. There's no bill. The money just quietly disappears into the escalating cost of the life you've built. And the compound growth that would have come with it disappears with it. There's a dimension of lifestyle creep that doesn't get much attention. And I think it's worth spending some time on it. Because it's not just about what you spend, it's about what you accumulate. Most people over a lifetime acquire things: furniture, clothes, equipment, collections, things that were useful, things that were meaningful, things that seemed like a good idea at the time. And gradually, slowly, those things take up space: physical space, financial space, and something less obvious: freedom of movement. Here's a data point that illustrates the scale of the problem. In the US and Europe is following the same trajectory. Roughly 1 in 10 households now rents a self-storage unit. Not 1 in 100, 1 in 10. And this is happening despite the fact that homes have been getting significantly larger over the past 50 years. Think about that for a moment. Homes are bigger than they've ever been. And people still don't have enough space for the things they own. So they rent additional space at an average cost of around 150 euros a month in Western Europe to store things they're not using. 150 euros a month for 20 years, invested instead at 7%, that's roughly 75 to 80,000 euros. Generated by the decision not to pay someone else to store the things you don't need. But the storage cost is just the most obvious line item. The larger financial consequence of accumulation is what it does to your flexibility. Every possession you own is a small weight. A house full of possessions is an anchor. It determines the size of home you need, which determines your rent or mortgage. It constrains where you can live, because moving becomes a major logistical and financial event. It makes it harder to take advantage of opportunities that require geographic mobility. It ties up capital in depreciating objects that sit in rooms you may not be using. I'm not making a case for living out of a single bag. I'm making a financial observation. The heavier the footprint of possessions, the higher the fixed cost structure of your life, and the lower your flexibility to change it. And there's one more dimension worth naming: the time cost. Every additional thing you own requires some amount of management. Maintenance, insurance, repair, eventual disposal. These aren't large costs individually, but they accumulate, both financially and in attention, in exactly the same way that lifestyle spending does. I want to be clear about something before we go further. I'm not about to tell you which way to live. People make different choices for entirely legitimate reasons. Family, culture, profession, personal preference, none of that is the subject here. What is the subject is what different structural approaches to the cost of living actually produce financially over time. Because if you're going to make a choice, it's worth knowing the numbers behind it. Let me sketch two ends of a spectrum, not as ideals, but as illustrations of the financial logic. On one end, a high fixed cost model. This is the majority model in most of Europe. You accumulate possessions. You maintain a home large enough to hold them. You have car payments, subscription layers, a storage unit perhaps, and a lifestyle whose monthly floor, the minimum it costs just to exist in your current setup, is relatively high. This model has real advantages: stability, comfort, roots, but it has a specific financial consequence. Your investable surplus, what's left after the fixed cost of your life, is structurally limited. And if your income falls or you want to change direction, the cost of doing so is significant. On the other hand, a low fixed cost model. This is the model associated with people who choose to own less, live lean, and prioritize mobility. It's what you see in parts of the digital nomad community, or in people who've made a deliberate choice to compress the fixed costs of their lives. The monthly floor is low. The investable surplus is structurally higher, not because they necessarily earn more, but because less of what they earn is pre-committed to maintaining a lifestyle infrastructure. Here's what the maths say about that difference. Take someone in the high fixed cost model who's spending 500 euros a month more than they need to, spread across the various layers of lifestyle infrastructure. Slightly too much flat, a car they could do without, storage, a few extra subscriptions. 500 euros a month that a lower fixed cost version of their life wouldn't require. 500 euros a month invested at 7% over 30 years gives us roughly 580,000 to 600,000 euros. That's not a lifestyle upgrade. That's a fundamentally different financial outcome. The point isn't that you should choose the low fixed cost model. The point is that the choice between these models is one of the most consequential financial decisions most people ever make. And the majority of people make it without ever consciously making it at all. It just happens, through accumulated choices, each of which felt perfectly reasonable at the time. Lifestyle creep is what happens when you drift into the high fixed cost model without noticing. One upgrade at a time. The anchor grows heavier. The escalator keeps moving up. And the surplus that was supposed to build your financial future quietly gets absorbed into the infrastructure of the present. Here are 4 concrete things to do this week. None of them require a dramatic life change. First, calculate your monthly fixed floor. Add up everything it costs just to exist in your current setup, before any discretionary spending. Rent or mortgage, car payments, insurance, utilities, subscriptions, storage. That number is the weight you're carrying before the month even starts. Write it down. Second, identify your lifestyle creep layer. Look at the last 2 or 3 salary increases you've had. What new costs appeared alongside them? Be honest with yourself. Not to punish yourself, just to see the mechanism clearly. Third, calculate the opportunity cost of one of those creep decisions. Pick the biggest one. Run the compound interest maths on what that monthly cost would be worth if invested instead, over 20 or 30 years. Use the numbers from this video as a template. The point isn't guilt, it's clarity. You can't make a deliberate choice without seeing the actual cost. Fourth, identify one thing in your possession load that you could realistically remove. Not everything, one thing. Sell it, give it away, cancel it. The habit of auditing your possessions once a year, the same way you'd audit your subscriptions, is worth building early. Lifestyle creep isn't a moral failure. It's not a sign that something went wrong. It's what happens when the cost of your life is allowed to expand to meet your income, rather than being kept deliberately below it. The question isn't whether you enjoy the things you spend money on, Most people do. The question is whether the life you're building is the life you choose if you'd seen the maths first. Money is a tool, and if you don't learn to control your finances will control you.